Hello and welcome. My name is Woody Colahan. I've worked in the music library at University of Denver for a total of 14 years. Both my undergraduate and graduate degrees in music and my master's in library science are from DU. In this video, I'll be sharing some of my ideas about performing arts librarianship at our school. I'll be talking about three trends that I see in performing arts librarianship. First, I'll talk about a new trend in digital humanities, which I call enhanced humanities, or e-humanities, and discuss what I see as its specific relevance to the area of theater. Next, I'd like to talk about issues of information literacy as applied to bibliographic instruction in music. Finally, I'll discuss what I call user-centered service design in the specific context of the progressive service model we've developed here at DU, and talk about our ongoing efforts to extend that model to the music library. In discussing e-humanities, first I want to talk about its special relevance to the area of theater. Then, to put the discussion in context, I'll briefly discuss the first and second waves of digital humanities projects. Finally, I'll talk about the current wave of projects in digital humanities and what makes it different. E-humanities has particular relevance to theater librarianship because of all humanistic disciplines. Theater has the most ancient tradition as the crucible of humanistic thought. Euripides, Sophocles, Shakespeare, and Beaumarchais give us some of our most fundamental ideas about our relationships with each other and with ourselves. In our own day, theater librarianship has a deep concern with performance documentation projects, efforts to preserve and recreate the moment of live performance. Theater scholarship is also profoundly engaged with questions about performance, defining and refining our ideas about performance. For example, the theme of last November's American Society for Theater Research Conference was the question, what performs? E-humanities projects are a natural fit in this context because they examine these questions in original ways. Now, if we step back and look at the evolution of digital humanities over the years, we can see two distinct waves of initiatives. The first wave, which got underway in the 1960s, was focused on computerized processing of text. These projects were generally called not digital humanities, but humanities computing projects. The pioneering project in this area was a 56-volume concordance of the writings of Thomas Aquinas, prepared by the Italian scholar Father Roberto Busa. His work, carried out in collaboration with Thomas Watson, the founder of IBM, demonstrated for the first time the potential of computerized processing in linguistic analysis. Another important and influential early project in this area was Mosteller and Wallace's computerized analysis of the text of the Federalist Papers in 1964, which was able to attribute authorship to James Madison over Alexander Hamilton of the 12 so-called disputed papers. This project became a model for later projects in automated linguistic analysis. The second wave of digital humanities projects began when multimedia capabilities made it not only possible but actually practical to digitally capture sounds and images. Digital repositories of images and documents began to be created around this time. JSTOR and ArtStore, two of the most important of these repositories, date from this period. Our own in-house repository, Digital DU, is also a repository of this type. Both of these waves of projects were essentially quantitative, providing digital processing of or digital access to existing material rather than creating new material. By contrast, the current wave of enhanced humanities projects is essentially qualitative in approach, using technology to allow scholars to experience materials in new ways. Some of these new projects seek to recreate performance experiences or performance spaces. An example of this is the Virtual Vaudeville project created by engineers at Georgia Tech, which combines three-dimensional animation and virtual reality techniques to develop a platform capable of reproducing theatrical or cultural performances from any historical period. Some of these projects use technology to combine different types of information to enhance our understanding of issues. An example of this is the Comédie Française Registers Project, a collaboration between the Comédie Française and engineers at MIT, who have combined large archival datasets from the 17th and 18th centuries with advanced visualization techniques that enable scholars to explore patterns of correlation over time between diverse measures, such as box office receipts and repertoire performed. So I think we can say that e-humanities, the current third wave of digital humanities, represents something new, because it uses technology to create new experiences, and these experiences can help us to better understand theater practice of the past. Now I will move to the next major trend that I want to discuss, which is information literacy and its impact on music bibliographic instruction. I'll begin with a short discussion of definitions and standards in this area. Then I'll address some special problems in music information literacy. After that, I'll discuss information literacy in the internet environment. And finally, I'll touch on an emerging idea that is coming to be known as meta-literacy. Definitions of information literacy vary, but it's generally agreed to refer to the ability to identify, locate, evaluate, and use information effectively. The ACRL has a published set of standards for information literacy. They're quite old now. They have been under review since 2011, and a thoroughly revised set of standards are expected to be issued this year. The existing document is divided into 6 standards: identifying information needs, accessing information, evaluating information, assimilating information, using information, and respecting intellectual property rights. The Music Library Association has its own document, which is closely based on the ACRL standards. In fact, it includes the entire text of the ACRL standards and only adds music-specific examples for selected performance indicators. This document will need to be revised after the new ACRL document is published. Now, in the music information environment, we deal with a highly specialized context, which means that there are a number of special issues to face when teaching information literacy to music students. For instance, research tells us when musicians search library catalogs for scores and recordings, known item searches predominate over unknown item searches. This is contrary to the picture for general users. Also, we know that musician searchers prefer to search by author rather than title, because titles are problematic in music. They're often generic, they're often in foreign languages, and unified titles do not correspond to popular titles. This means that musician users use catalogs in different ways than general users and need different skills. In fact, many music users prefer legacy search interfaces over discovery layer tools like Encore or Summon. Another problem we face in music information is the problem of music notation, which comes to us in a variety of packages, not all of which have warning labels attached. So students have to learn to distinguish between performing scores and study scores, between full scores, reduced scores, and arrangements, between interpretive scores, critical scores, and so-called text scores. To do this, they need to understand the editing process, the issues editors face, the history of editorial standards, and even the history of music notation. Students also need to learn to navigate several large standard, critical, and historical score collections. To do this, they need to learn to use a whole dedicated set of tools, some of which are in print, some of which are online, and most of which are unfortunately out of date. A very difficult problem in music information literacy is that foreign language reference and research material is ubiquitous throughout music scholarship. Partly as a heritage of the fact that musicology as a discipline was essentially invented in Germany and only much later exported to the Anglo-American world. But also because even before that, most theoretical, critical, and historical writing in music was produced in French, Italian, or German. Therefore, it's important to understand that the ability to access information in foreign languages is far more crucial in music scholarship than it is in most other disciplines. Here at DU, for example, and this is by no means unusual, candidates for a master's degree in musicology must pass a proficiency standard in a foreign language. This is not the case in most disciplines. Finally, music has a number of unique reference and research tools that really have no analog in other fields. An example of this is thematic catalogs and catalogue raisonné. These are catalogs of compositions, but they're also indexes to primary and secondary source material for compositions and to critical writing about compositions. They can be difficult even for the experienced scholar and are often bewildering for students. They're more often than not in a foreign language, they're full of abbreviations, and they may be organized in many different ways. Students have to be guided gently with a highly scaffolded instructional approach to learn to unlock the information in these sources. Most of what I've been discussing so far applies to print materials in the music information environment. Now I'd like to touch on some issues of information literacy that arise in the internet environment. Musicians, like other students, need to learn that not all the information on the web is accessible to them through a keyword search engine like Google. This is partly because the majority of information on the web is hidden in databases that are not accessible to search engine crawlers, the first definition of the deep web, and partly because most resources that are accessible to search engines are so far down in the long tail of search results that they are effectively invisible, the second definition of the deep web. To compensate for the database problem, students need to learn to think of web searching as a two-step process. First, finding appropriate databases and indexes, and then querying them effectively. To compensate for the long tail problem, they need to learn to use all of the advanced search operators and techniques that search engines offer. Of course, they need to learn to use special tools like Google Scholar or Amazon Content Search. Most importantly, however, they need to understand that success in searching the web has everything to do with their understanding of their topic, and very little to do with their understanding of search engines. This is why, although it is counterintuitive, a web search should take place not before, but after a more traditional preliminary search in tertiary monographs, subject encyclopedias, and article databases. These resources give students a good grasp of the conceptual structure and core vocabulary in their topic, which in turn positions them to create effective web searches. Critical evaluation skills, the crucial third element in ACRL's 6-point standard, are more important in the internet environment than ever before. Students need to learn to evaluate the scope, depth, currency, credibility, and bias of everything they see, and to always compare what one source says with what another source says. Students must also understand open access information, both in its most positive and in its least positive manifestations. They should know about open access publishing and the growing importance of open access publishing. They should know how to use tools like DOAJ, Highwire, and Oyster to find open access resources. But they must also understand that there is such a thing as predatory open access publishing, and that not every journal they see is one that deserves their trust, or one to which they should submit their own work. So they must also be familiar with tools like Beall's List to weed out less than credible open access publishers. Students should also understand both the value and the limitations of community-managed information sources like Wikipedia. We all use Wikipedia. but it is difficult sometimes to explain to a student why it is all right to look something up on Wikipedia, but not all right to cite it in a footnote. Teachers understand the difference, but for a student it can be subtle. I propose that the best way to teach the intelligent use of these resources is to make students into active contributors to this information space. A student who has authored or edited a Wikipedia article will understand on a much more basic level that anyone can do this. And if anyone can do it, then maybe someone they don't have much respect for could do it too. And the next time they encounter information on Wikipedia, they'll approach it with a more appropriate level of trust and verify it with another source before accepting it as accurate. The point is that a student who has had the experience of authorship will understand this better than a student who has only had it explained to them by a teacher. Before leaving information literacy, I'd like to address an emerging concept that is coming to be known as meta-literacy. Meta-literacy means many things. One of the things it means is learning to approach information as producers as well as consumers. Of course, we teach students to produce information every time they write a research paper, but how often do we really teach them to self-identify as producers? I believe teaching students to adopt the perspective of producers of information is one of the best ways to turn them into discriminating consumers of information. Meta-literacy also means having a metacognitive awareness of our own information competencies. In other words, being able to think about the way we think about information. This is a very highly developed level of critical self-awareness of our own information behavior. But students preparing themselves for an unknown information future must have it in order to succeed. The competencies that are adequate today will not be adequate tomorrow, and they need to know this ahead of time so they can position themselves to be constantly learning new information tools and practices as they become necessary. Meta-literacy also includes the emerging concept of multiple literacies, of which information literacy is only one. Others include scientific literacy, media literacy, cultural literacy, and many more. This, I think, is where meta-literacy suddenly becomes a very big idea, because meta-literacy seeks the skills to read and interpret the world itself as an information text. In the past, teachers would interpret the world to their students, and students would go out into the world armed with that interpretation. But today, the world changes so fast that no fixed interpretation can ever be sufficient or definitive. Finally, meta-literacy means learning to embrace change, both evolutionary and disruptive. Today's students will inhabit a world vastly, even unimaginably different from our own. We cannot teach them the skill sets that they will need because those skill sets have not yet been invented. What we can do, what we must do, is to help them acquire a robust set of basic cognitive tools that will allow them to thrive in any information environment, no matter what the required skill sets may look like. I'll be moving now to my last topic. In the field of software engineering, there's a concept called user-centered experience design. What I'd like to talk about now is what I call user-centered service design. I'll be discussing this in the context of what is already happening at DU and our continuing efforts to extend our progressive service model to the music library. I will address paging and delivery of print and media materials, demand-driven acquisition, circulation of media and technology devices, and streaming delivery of media. The paging and delivery process is well established at Anderson, and DU is a leader in this kind of service. Up until now, this service has not been extended to the music library, but recently, very recently I might add, this service has been deployed between Anderson and the music library. I wish I could say I was responsible for this, but the heavy lifting was all accomplished by Ryan Buller, Carolyn Rue, Marisa Bissinger, and Blake Nikoloff. I want to thank them for their work in extending this service to the music library. I, and the rest of the music library staff welcome the opportunity to provide this extra degree of service to our patrons, who will no longer have to walk 10 minutes across campus every time they want to see an item from the main collection. We will miss having students from the rest of the university visit us to see our collection, but they will surely find it more convenient in most cases to have our items delivered to them at Anderson. Music patrons, including some of the most overscheduled students in the university, will enjoy the convenience even more because Prospector, Mobius, and interlibrary loans can now for the first time be delivered to them directly without that trek across campus. I expect music patrons' use of these services to increase. Demand-driven acquisition is really a collection development issue, but it's a customer service orientation to collection development, so it fits well into this discussion. DDA is also well established in the main library collection. Until recently, the music collection was not part of this program. Today, the music collection is part of this program. I just want to emphasize that I see this as a good thing. Music patrons now have more influence on what the library collects, and this will have a positive impact on use of the collection. We know from research that items acquired through DDA circulate at a much higher rate than items acquired through traditional channels. Now, our music library has a significant collection of over 10,000 audio CDs, plus a smaller number of video recordings. While the main library circulates its much smaller collection of audio recordings and its much larger collection of videos, the music library has always held its recordings on permanent reserve. In 2013, the music library began circulating most of its video recordings. This was a good first step. The main library has also been circulating technology devices such as video recorders for several years. This past fall, the music library finally followed suit, and our video and audio recorders are very popular with patrons. The appropriate next step is to make the music library's CD collection available for circulation. Many institutions have made this change in recent years. Informal surveys indicate that none of them have regretted it. The very small increase in damage or shrinkage is more than offset by the increased use of the library's collection. However, CDs themselves are approaching obsolescence as an audio delivery platform. So whether we circulate them or not, we should be thinking about the next stage in access to these items, and that is streaming delivery of media. Like similar institutions, we've already implemented streaming delivery through subscription databases. This is also a good first step. Now it is time to deliver our own CD collection to our users in streaming format. This is the delivery method they expect in a contemporary environment. There are many platform options to consider, but I would definitely recommend the platform created at University of Indiana and deployed there since 1996. It is available as a free open source software package. It's specifically designed for use in a music school, and it has been adopted by more than 24 institutions across North America. This platform, called Variations, has a number of pedagogical enhancements built in that not only make the service more valuable to instructors and students, but also help the institution stay more safely within fair use guidelines by maximizing the transformative nature of content delivery. Convenient media delivery of this kind will actually make DU even more compliant with copyright law by minimizing the illegal copying of CDs that we are powerless to prevent. These are 3 trends that are important for performing arts librarianship. How can we address these trends? We can address them by viewing them as opportunities. Opportunities for collaboration, for creativity, and for proactively embracing change. Opportunities for collaboration include sitting down with the theater department and beginning a series of conversations around their needs from the library and their vision for how the library can contribute to their unique mission. They include sitting down with the governing body of the dance library to begin a similar conversation about their vision for the future of that collection, its development and deployment. They include close collaboration with the Anderson Access team on continuing implementation of paging and delivery services, and they include close collaboration with library systems on development of a streaming media platform for the music library. Finally, they include deepening the existing collaboration with the music faculty on a number of issues. One example is the adoption of the standards used by the music faculty for evaluation of student writing in upper division courses, which I have already incorporated into the Introduction to Grad Studies class that I teach. This allows students to become familiar with the standards that will be applied to their work when they go on to other classes. A simple but very important instructional step. Opportunities for scholarship include work in the area of information literacy, a rapidly growing and developing area of study. I'm particularly interested in information literacy as a digital divide issue, possibilities for game design and information literacy instruction, and of course, information literacy in music. I propose to begin by following up on a paper published by Thomas Heck in 1993, which sought to quantify bibliographic quality control in music degree documents. I would like to carry out a similar study, now that more than 2 decades have passed, and see if the situation has improved or deteriorated. Heck's vision was for a greater role for librarians in the approval of degree documents, and I think that is a vision worth taking up. My first master's is in music theory, so I also have research intentions in this field, especially in the area of hypermeter in Baroque music, which was the topic of my master's thesis. Another project I have already begun to work on is an annotated bibliography bringing together materials related to the transcription into modern notation of fretted instrument tablatures from the 16th through 18th centuries. These are a few of my ideas about performing arts librarianship and how it can be moved forward at DU. Thank you for watching this video. Please contact me if you'd like to discuss any of these ideas.